Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Prada, Adidas, Estee Lauder, Mattel, and Toyota. These global brands have all recently invested in space sponsorships or technical partnerships with branding rights, and the reason is clear. Space has a 75% interest across every demographic, with heightened interest among the 18 to 35-year-olds, according to Statista. Sponsorship is becoming a new revenue stream for space companies, helping raise funds, reduce mission costs, and forge new technical partnerships that accelerate hub success. Forbes Space, a dedicated global space sponsorship agency and the first in Europe, helps space companies create a tailored portfolio of sponsorship rights to maximize their attractiveness to global partners. And my guest on this edition of the Terra podcast is Stirling Forbes, founder and CEO of Forbes Space Limited. Stirling, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure, Tom.
Let's start out just really with the basics. What is a space sponsorship?
Well, I think it's really much like a sponsorship in Formula One, for example, that many of us are familiar with, just in an industry that is far more diverse and complex, I would say. I mean, at its heart, it is a strategic partnership. It's a 1 + 1 = 3, where brands and space companies or agencies, they're able to achieve more together. A brand receives the unparalleled product differentiation and publicity that comes with associating with a space company. And the space company will receive the crucial financial or technical or global public awareness support for their mission or innovation or exploration, or really just general progress for humanity.
But when you make that comparison to Formula One, or I guess here in the United States would say NASCAR,
Absolutely.
You don't see the brand on the spacecraft necessarily unless you catch it just as it's being launched. It's not like you're seeing it go around the track time after time and there's the STP logo. So what is the benefit for the company in that regard?
Well, I think when you're looking at sponsorship, the best sponsorships are not the ones that are a sticker on the side of a race car, for example. Right. It's what that sticker might represent, let's say. So in the terms of a space sponsorship, it's the enhanced brand association that a company can leverage with being on board a pioneering or humanity-first mission into space. Not only that association, but also potential product testing with what is widely seen, I would say, in the public as probably the most advanced cutting-edge technology available, and also the opportunity to directly contribute to this exciting cause as well.
I think one of the most recent examples of that is we had a story recently that there's a company that is basically making building blocks for structures in space that look like Lego blocks.
Right, yeah.
And they've taken one of their prototypes and they're putting it on tour in Lego stores around the world. Is that kind of what you're talking about here with a space sponsorship?
In a way, but in a way it's also on a deeper level. So it's about finding the opportunities that are synergistic. So yes, the Lego building blocks is a very nice touch. I like that one. But also it's about how can the brand leverage itself as well. So Lego is a nice example, but we're also looking with partners that are keen to maybe product test and develop technologies for Earth from their own products in space. So helping the space company while also helping that brand as well.
So what are some of those specific benefits that a brand can expect from sponsoring a space mission or project? And how does that go beyond what people would consider traditional marketing?
Well, the vast majority of brands really don't know where to start with space. You know, they primarily see NASA, SpaceX, maybe ESA if we're lucky, but they have very little idea just how diverse, how wide-ranging, how international our industry really is. The challenge for them is to find the right partnership and to navigate this complexity. And this is where we try and help at Forbes Space by providing them with the space companies that fit their marketing objectives. But it's a bit of a journey to get there, in fact, because we have to start with the space company. So we go to the space company and we say, what do you need, really? That's the simple question.
Right.
Do you need more funding? Do you need increased sales? Do you need global public awareness for your mission? And then we create a sort of sponsorship targeting strategy of the companies that we believe would be the best fit for that space company, based on the synergy of that brand and the values of that brand and the target audience of that brand. And then we pitch directly to that company, often out of nowhere. They're not expecting a space sponsorship to turn up at their door, but we say, look, we've got this great opportunity. Here's some creative ideas that your brand can use with this space project. What do you think? And generally, they're pretty receptive. It's a new thing for them.
So then what challenges do brands typically face when they enter into a space sponsorship arena, and how do they overcome those challenges?
Well, primarily it's to do with the complexity of the industry. They need to know who to invest in terms of the sponsorship. They need to know what's capable as well. They need to know, is it just a sticker at a very, very basic level, or is it a complete skill merger between our facilities, our employees, our whole brand identity? Will we need to conduct advertising campaigns to leverage this properly? What locations, what target audiences? So there's a lot of complexity that goes into sponsorship. It's not merely a connection between two companies. It's about finding how to make the most of that connection.
You know, at the top of the show, I talked about brands like Estee Lauder and Toyota. And are those mostly the kinds of sponsorships that you're talking about that would be R&D type sponsorships? I mean, is Toyota looking to increase the way its batteries work in its hybrid vehicles, those kinds of things? Or can they be more superficial than that?
They can, of course, be more superficial. It's definitely possible for a brand that just wants to leverage the fantastic mission that we're trying to do here in space. But the best sponsorships are the ones that engage on multiple levels. So the best sponsorships are, for example, with the Toyota, which is directly involved with the pressurized rover that JAXA is developing for the lunar missions. And for Toyota, they, as you said, battery technology, they're directly putting that into their vehicles here on Earth. One other example is with the NASA LTD contracts. 2 out of the 3 teams have sponsorships with Michelin, with Goodyear, General Motors, companies that are keen to develop their own technologies on Earth while also leveraging the brand association.
Are there companies then that are looking to even do more microgravity research, the things that they can't do here on Earth? And is that part of what it is that you're working with companies on?
Yeah, absolutely. Microgravity is a fantastic new avenue for space research for Earth. We're seeing semiconductors or fiber optic cables or biopharma getting increasingly involved into experiments on the ISS, for example. But this has generally been quite cost prohibitive, let's say, for them to go to the ISS. But it won't be in the future once launch costs start coming down with reusability. As space is increasingly democratized, I think we're going to see a large influx of additional companies wanting to test in space.
So then in what ways can a space sponsorship contribute to a brand's corporate social responsibility initiatives?
That is an interesting question, actually. We hadn't actually considered CSR for approaching brands, but I think, in a way, the sponsorship of this industry directly supports scientific research. I think we could definitely say that. Fostering international collaboration between different countries, promoting environmental sustainability, of course, with Earth observation technologies, helping fight floods, deforestation, agriculture health, potentially inspiring a lot of future generations to go into STEM careers as well. You know, if they're seeing their favorite shoe brand, let's say Adidas, are saying, we're sponsoring the company that's helping train the next astronauts for the moon, they might be increasingly inspired by what we're trying to do here in the space industry. So I think there's a lot of potential for CSR, actually.
As I would say, Adidas, because I put my emphasis on Adidas, a different syllable.
Yes. That's the London accent coming out.
But they might be designing those next boots as well for the spacesuits. You never know.
Yes. I'll come back to you on that one.
So talk to me a little bit about your customer acquisition. Do you go out and approach customers and say, have I got a deal for you? Do companies come to you and say, we're looking for something connected with space? How do you find those companies that are interested in getting involved in this?
It's increasingly a mix of both. At the start, it was primarily about raising awareness that space sponsorship is a possibility on a large scale. And now we're starting to see space companies and non-space companies start to filter in saying, you're the ones doing space sponsorship. Can we have a discussion about something like this? And usually we we connect with the space companies and go to them and say, what do you need, as I said? And we work out what would be the right brands for them to target. So I was at the La Six de New Space conference in Paris just this week. So fresh off the train from Paris. And there we were talking to a lot of space companies that were saying, oh, sponsorship, that is an interesting avenue. I hadn't considered that, because often the mindset, particularly from an engineering perspective, is this is my product. This is how I'm going to get funding. It's venture capital and private equity, maybe a business angel, or grants. And I expect a timeline of this time because I've hired these people. So it's a very linear progression. What they don't consider is perhaps an external factor from outside of the space industry that they weren't aware of. And that's what we try and raise awareness of, let's say.
I can tell you've talked to a few engineers.
Yes, definitely part of the job.
And of course, in the business that I grew up in, sponsorship was everything. I mean, you went out and you found people who wanted to support what it was that you were doing, and they would pay you money to do that. And I think that's something that the space industry really hasn't quite grasped yet, is that there is a lot of interest in what's going on out there. And it's not necessarily an immediate return on investment. However, it is something that if you can get your brand connected with something along those lines, it could be really lucrative for the company down the road.
Exactly. You get it completely. I mean, an example of down the road, let's say, let's talk really down the road.
Sure.
Probably the most famous space sponsorship that wasn't technically a space sponsorship, but an unofficial space sponsorship, let's say, was Omega with the Apollo missions, right?
Okay.
That was a classic. And people around the world, billions of people actually, saw an Omega wristwatch on the Apollo astronauts. And I mean, they're still leveraging that over, what is it now, 55 years later? They're still leveraging that same space sponsorship, that they were part of those historic missions. So that's what we're trying to bring back to the space industry a little bit.
Wasn't Nikon one of the cameras that went on some of those missions as well? It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, but these sponsorships were not companies going, oh, the Apollo missions, that would be a good one to sponsor. For some reason, that didn't cross their mind. This was, even though there were billions of people who might watch these missions, but these products were chosen because of their technical excellence. They were chosen because they were the very best available at the time to do their job and to not fail reliably. So these products were chosen for a reason. And it's a similar sort of thing that will be associated with the brands that are currently working with the space industry, because people have this, as I said, perception of space being absolutely the forefront of technology. So if, let's say, Omega is now working with the Artemis missions, Omega must still be the best watch brand that you can buy. So, it's this association that we try and talk with companies about.
And it makes for a great picture in a magazine ad.
It always does, yes.
Stirling, can you share, coming back to your company a little bit, an example of a successful space sponsorship campaign that significantly boosted the brand's visibility and reputation from some people that you've worked with?
Yeah, well, I can't tell you exactly specifics of ongoing projects. We can get into some of the clients that we work with later in the podcast, I'm sure. But I can tell you about a team that we've worked with in the US that do space sponsorship. And I can tell you about this because it's a public announcement now. It's happened and it's exciting. So this team that we work with, they facilitated the Columbia Sportswear sponsorship on the side of Intuitive. So this first American private lander on the moon, Columbia Sportswear was on the side of that. And they were the only sponsor there, actually, I have to say. That was a wonderful differentiation from the competition in the clothing market because not only was it unique proof of them being an innovative brand, being at the forefront of technology, but also for the quality of their product. So the Columbia Sportswear people developed fabrics that were actually used on the rover that landed on the moon. It was, almost an essential part of the rover. It was to do with thermal regulation. So these brands are not only seeing space as an awareness opportunity, but also, as I said, a product testing opportunity. So hopefully, once we get some more exciting opportunities that I'll be able to tell you in public, we can come back and talk about some of those. But I can tell you we have definitely a lot in the pipeline. To give you an idea of the range, I can tell you that we are working with people who do analog space missions, who do suborbital space missions, and then people who take you to space and hopefully return from space. So there's a large variety up and down the value chain of space companies who are starting to realize the potential, and now we're going out to find them those sponsors.
My guest is Stirling Forbes, founder and CEO of Forbes Space on the Terra podcast. Take a moment right now to click subscribe so to be sure you don't miss any of our podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, any of the videos from Terra, the Journal of Space Commerce. Stirling, let's explore some broader trends in space commerce, like consumer brands and space agencies, and how Forbes Space aligns with those.
Well, broader trends. We do obviously closely monitor trends in space commerce or how the space industry is developing, because it's essential for being able to tell sponsors, look, this is some exciting new things that are happening in the space industry. And for me personally, and for my team, I think one of the most exciting aspects that's happening right now is the longer term impact of space innovation on the democratization of space. The companies that are developing the fully reusable space planes and fully reusable rockets, these are the ones that will not only accelerate public interest in space, as it already has. We see huge crowds at Boca Chica of people that might not have been interested in space before, but also they have the potential to directly facilitate engagement with the public, with space. As these costs of going to space become cheaper and cheaper, the amount of people that will know somebody or have seen someone on social media that have gone to space, I mean, we're talking about a massive expansion of a democratization of space in people's minds, almost potentially every day. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity, not only for the industry itself, but also for engaging some of these other brands.
Tell me how you got started. What got you interested not only in space, but then trying to find that connection between space and marketing?
Well, we can start right at the beginning. In space, I would say my mother indoctrinated me from a very young age on Star Trek Voyager. I grew up watching that show. So, these ideals of exploration, of finding out what is out there in space was definitely ingrained into me somewhere along the way. But then it sort of petered out, the end of the space shuttle program, nothing really was happening in the space industry. And then the Falcon Heavy launch happened, the first one that sent that Tesla into space. And that for me was very eye-opening, because it was really like seeing science fiction happen in real life. And that promoted my interest in the space industry. Then further down the line, I went to do a Master of Space Studies at the International Space University. And that was a fantastic program, because I graduated from that in actually just December last year. But that was a focus on interdisciplinarity. That this interdisciplinarity really opened my eyes to just how diverse the space industry is. It's not just rockets. It's biotech. It's people doing reusable launches that the launcher actually decreases as it flies up like a candle. All these different amazing innovations that are happening in the space industry that the general public is just not aware of. And so what happened with me is I came out of that program and I said to myself, we really need to help these companies that most people don't know about, that are struggling to find the grants, that are struggling to find the funding, that are struggling to articulate themselves in a commercial sense. Because as we talked about, a lot of them are engineers. So I began Forbes Space really with a vision that Forbes Space should be a service hub, something that really hasn't existed in the space industry yet, for any space innovation or mission, regardless of sector, helping space professionals through the true service commercialization of the space sector. So our primary mission, like as we have been talking about, is sponsorship. We try and bridge the gap between space industry and global brands, but we've also diversified into growth and financial services to better accelerate this mission that we're trying to do. So we call that launch new space and fund new space, respectively. And we're trying to align ourselves also with the other prominent leading global partners in this field, so that when a company comes to Forbes Space, they know that we'll be able to give them directly, or at least put them in contact with, the very best person to solve their commercial issues in that perspective. So that's what we're trying to do. And I was inspired from all those different steps into eventually reaching this point.
And you mentioned your team. Who's working with you?
Yeah, so we have some fantastic people on board. Our team consists of experienced professionals, both in the sponsorship, obviously, arena, but also in space experience as well, because it's all about uniting those two fields finally. And so I can give you an example. Our team is mainly associate based. So We bring in specific members from around the world as required for specific projects. So whether it's to do with film or whether it's to do with the aviation sector, or, for example, one person has decades of space experience, consultancy experience. So they're primarily focused on our fund new space offer. So financial modeling, investor proposal preparation, very essential things for some startup space companies. But then another core member has decades of experience of sponsorship in Formula One and motorsport more generally, as well as sales leadership, consulting, coaching experience around winning major contracts. So it's all about picking up these individual people that are interested in the mission of space, are interested in trying to support this endeavor, and putting them in one place that they can all help in some way.
It's obviously a relatively new field. How much competition is there out there for what it is that you're doing?
At the moment, very little. What we're trying to do is partner with the ones that are our competitors, because we believe that going to the market, we shouldn't try and confuse them with multiple different offerings. And the partners that we're working with, they recognize that. They recognize that sponsorship is a fantastic opportunity for the space industry, but we don't really actually have any direct competitors. The way that we approach through creative conceptualization is what we think is unique, especially in Europe that we know of. What our direct competitors are we're working towards as partners. So they might be focused more on R&D or government missions, or they might be more focused on product placement specifically. So we're trying to link all these different chains together. So,
are you part of a marketing team? For instance, if a company is looking at an overall marketing strategy and wants to include space in that, is your company one that they would pay a retainer to keep you working as part of their interest?
Yeah, we're having that. We're exploring that relationship with some companies outside of the space industry, because it's a relatively new thing. Some companies think, oh, no, we've got a very big marketing team. In fact, we have floors of marketing people. We have it under control. Often they go, actually, can we get your perspectives on this? Because space is, once you start out, you're like, oh, okay, it's a little bit more complex than I thought. It's not just rockets. So I can give you an example of a client, let's say. So this client that we're working with is a luxury good company. It's present at every major luxury sporting event. So Formula One, tennis, polo, that sort of thing. So as I said, we're working with people that are doing space tourism on all the different value chains of space tourism, let's say. So the people who are the early adopters of this space tourism are almost by definition, maybe unfortunately, ultra high net worth individuals, right? They're the only ones who can afford the ticket at the moment. These are very hard people to reach, I have to say. They have their information filtered. They have multiple levels of PAs. They're very busy being entrepreneurs or running very complex organizations, right? So accessing these people require a lot of existing relationships. You've got to know someone who knows someone to get to these people. So the brand that we're working with, they have these relationships with these high net worth individuals because they have to. It's their business model. It's who buys their product, right? So we see a very good fit between trying to connect that luxury brand to the companies that can bring the stardust, the space travel to them, right? So we went to that brand directly and we said, look, can we help? I think this is a really good opportunity for your brand. So now we're currently in communication with them and hopefully helping them connect to some of our space tourism clients.
What impact do you think Stirling sponsorships are going to have on the broader space industry?
It's difficult to say at the moment, but I think if this is extensively adopted as a almost expected option for space companies to consider, much like VC is today, much like it is in Formula One now. I remember Formula One cars were just paint in the 60s and 70s, right? And now they are covered in stickers. So if this sort of widespread adoption happens in the space industry, I think it can significantly impact the industry, not only by providing a crucial avenue for funding, driving public awareness, of course, for the great work that we're all doing here every day, but also fostering collaborations between industries that can directly benefit the space industry through their own technologies and skills. I think space industry has a bit of a danger of being quite a closed industry, thinking that because we are in the space industry, we know best and we don't need help from other people. But it's not true. We can always use help and guidance from other companies, right? So I think there is potential for ultimately accelerating the pace of space exploration and wider technology development also here on Earth through involving these companies. So I hope it goes in that direction. We'll see.
Do you find that it's a hard sell, that it's a difficult close? I know when people talk about sales and they say you've got to overcome objections. What
Yes.
kinds of objections do you have to overcome when you're talking to a company to try to get them involved in a space sponsorship?
Usually the objections stem from eyes per dollar, which is a very classic sponsorship response, right? They say,
Right.
okay, we want to pay you $1 million. How many viewers can we get for $1 million that will see our name? This is the Super Bowl model, let's say. This, I think, drastically undersells the space industry. A rocket launch is viewed by a couple million people, but we're not going to get Super Bowl levels of people unless this may be the Artemis missions, right? So this is really undervaluing the space industry by trying to put it in the same box of sponsorship as Super Bowl, as Formula One, because we're not going to get that eyes per dollar. But what we will get is that branding differentiation. If you say, oh, we're working with a Formula One company, good, high technical excellence, risk-taking, innovative, not bad. We're working with a space company that is helping fight climate change. Their Earth observation satellites saved millions of lives, literally, in preventing widespread starvation through crop failure. That tackles a lot of nice things. Not only is it space, it's innovative, it's risk-taking, same as Formula One, but also has that humanity element behind it. And so that's what we try and communicate to the brands, that we say, you're looking at this wrong. You shouldn't be looking at this as a brand eye per dollar. You should be looking at this as a mission for humanity and a brand per dollar. It's that combination between the two.
Do you also come across, because when I think about, you mentioned, and we have this conversation internally all the time about people want to, how many eyeballs can you deliver?
Yes.
And you're not going to be able to deliver eyeballs, as you said. So, but do you find that it helps to talk to a company about, again, we talked about long term, that the ROI might not come tomorrow, but when you can say in your other advertising, your other marketing, we did this in space, and that might help kind of overcome some of those objections. And is that attractive to companies?
Yeah, absolutely. It is what is our company famous for, right?
Sure.
You can be a company that's famous for producing semiconductors. Fantastic. You're an essential part of our daily life here on Earth. But if that semiconductor company said, we are the semiconductor that was used to put human boots on Mars, right? It's a very long objective, but it's that sort of mindset that is very attractive to brands, because they can almost literally be in the history books of humanity. I really cannot think of another sponsorship opportunity that can have that claim, honestly. So I think it's a more longer term sponsorship engagement, but throughout those years of sponsorship engagement, whether it's 6 months before launch or whether it's 3 years before launch, that company can be leveraging that relationship every single day in their advertising, in their shop fronts, in the products that they develop, in the co-branding that they do. So it's not essentially a one and done, here we sponsored, goodbye. It's a long-term partnership that is trying to build something.
Sterling, we are just about out of time, but we ask this question of all of our guests. I want you to look at, if you might, over a 10 to 15-year time horizon in space commerce and your role in that, and tell me what you see.
That's a tricky question. I think over the next 10 to 15 years, I think we're going to see private space stations. We're going to see reusable space planes. We're going to see reusable rockets. We're going to see, I think, an even more interconnected world with space technologies, both in maritime, in agriculture, and internet. I mean, the list can go on. We know that well. Space commerce will be directly contributing to on a much greater level to the wheels of overall global commerce, right? So I would like to see in 10 to 15 years, myself and Forbes Space as a cog in that wheel. We want to be an accelerator of some of those critical space technology innovations, timelines, success rates. I think, thinking about it, if we can say that through our direct support of space companies, that we directly contributed to the first profitable space hotel, the first human mission to Mars, maybe saving thousands of lives, as we chatted about earlier, through predictive flood modeling or agriculture health. I think, me personally, and I think I can speak for my team as well, that we would feel that our mission was being fulfilled in those 10 to 15 years. And for my own personal sake, I think it would be a great honor to contribute to some of those very historic moments in human history. So I hope I get the chance to have that on.
And you're young enough, so I'll ask you this, but if somebody came and said, Stirling, we've got a spot, do you want to go? Would you go?
I would go, yes. I would say I wouldn't go to Mars just yet. But no,
that's going to be a one-way trip for
that's going to be a one-way trip for a little while. But a space hotel, yeah, I'll sign up for that.
Well, since Bill Shatner went at 90, I'm feeling maybe even I have a chance.
Maybe. I hope so.
Stirling, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on board.
Stirling Forbes is the founder and CEO of Forbes Space Limited. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Terra podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and many other popular podcasting platforms. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of our podcasts or any of our other videos. You can get daily updates on space commerce by subscribing to the Journal of Space Commerce on Substack at www.xterrajsc.com. And one thing more, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on X at xterrajsc. Until next time, I'm Tom Patton. Thanks for joining us.
I wanna go faster, faster. Hands in the air, we're gonna crash. Searching for the answers, like Galileo, the proof is looking glass. Thirst for reason, our dreamer's eyes we gaze into. A sense of purpose, know my view. Like finding water on the moon.